Welcome to week 4, day 1 of reporting Depp v. Heard from outside Fairfax County Court in Virginia. We've had a very interesting day of evidence and the biggest queue of the trial so far. Not quite sure what it is that prompted people to come along to listen to expert witnesses talking about various different sorts of perspectives on whether or not Johnny Depp has or hasn't been hurt by this 2018 Washington Post article, and a nurse's evidence and evidence from Travis McGiven, who was one of Johnny Depp's bodyguards. I think it is just the fact that word has now spread about this trial. Word has now reached most people, and they are seeing it on their social media updates, and they're finding out how they can get into court and finding out that they can queue up and get a wristband and join the queue. It does mean that I wasn't able to get into court today. As far as I'm aware, there were no journalists in court today. It was filled out with spectators. There is no special provision for journalists. And it's one of the issues that I bring up in my park bench interview with Jessie Webber, who is a presenter of the Law and Crime Network. After that, I have a remote park bench interview with Dr. Jessica Taylor, an academic and writer. She wrote Sexy But Psycho and the book Why Women Are Blamed for Everything, about the problems that women have when they try to raise the alarm over domestic violence or sexual abuse. And she called out Dr. Shannon Curry, the forensic psychologist who diagnosed Amber Heard with histrionic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder last week. So I was delighted when she agreed to come on the podcast and we explore that issue and many, many more things besides. But before we get to her, let's debrief the day's events with Jessie Webber. Hello and welcome to Park Bench interview on day 1 of week 4 of this epic trial. I'm delighted that I'm joined to debrief the day by Jessie Webber from the Law and Crime Network. Jessie, thanks so much for returning the favour, because I know I did a quick turn for you, didn't I?
You did. You did a great interview, and I'm glad I was able to return the favour.
I appreciate it, because I know you're very busy. I mean, all right, I want to get into this. I'm
Sure.
glad I've got a journalist on the bench, because I don't think there were any journalists who got into court today, and that's not for want of trying. I mean, we were all up early, we were all in the line, but obviously word has spread about this trial. There are only 100 places in court, and we do most of our work after court finishes, because we're debriefing the day as we are here, and then we do our writing and we do our podcasts and the like. And so we haven't yet found a way of staying awake for 24 hours and working
and
really
living
hard.
and surviving.
Yeah, that's the thing. So something's got to give, and it was a problem today, I think, because the live feed went down very briefly at the beginning and there were no journalists in court. And I don't know whether this is something that you think needs to be addressed, Jessie.
I do. I have a real problem with it, and I'll tell you why. Because this is a case that has a very strong public interest in it. And when you show up to the courthouse at 6 a.m., I showed up at 5:55, 5:40, and you cannot get a place into that courtroom. And there's a difference between what's on the live feed, and the world can see that, versus actually being in the courtroom, seeing the jury, reporting back about the atmosphere. You're losing that. And I'm sure that the court's opinion would be, well, it's broadcast, everyone can see it, but you are losing something. And I find that to be a big problem, because there is so much that you have to report upon. And on top of the fact, like you said, after this, I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing, I have to I do hits all day. It's exhausting, and to get there, there's a problem that the majority of that courtroom is filled with fans of Johnny Depp or fans of Amber Heard.
Which is fine. You know, it's absolutely fine to have spectators in court, but usually there are provisions made for journalists.
Yes.
And we're not trying to be special or trying to be pompous or precious about this, but for good reason, because journalists have a platform to communicate to the rest of the country or the world, and that's what our job is, essentially. But if we can't get into court because there are dedicated fans who are there from 2, 3 in the morning, it kind of, I don't know, I guess the court would say, I don't know, put someone in the line for you then and swap out when it's time to get the wristbands.
I mean, it's very easy to say. And look, when I covered the Harvey Weinstein trial out in New York, and there was provisions put in place for media. Now, that was a criminal trial. It was at a major public interest. That was, in the height of the Me Too movement. Somebody might look at this trial and say, oh, well, it's civil, it's kind of pop culture entertainment. But no, it's dealing with very serious issues. It's very important, and I think it's going to have a big impact. Particularly, look, I'm a lawyer as well, so when you talk about defamation law with public figures like celebrities, I'm not just looking at it from the entertainment factor, I'm looking from the legal factor. Yeah. This is going to be a big case. So the fact that we
and what
don't
it means for free speech in America,
absolutely,
if it goes Johnny Depp's way, and what it means for the Me Too movement if it goes Johnny Depp's way, and what it means for Johnny Depp's career. I mean, it's not just his career, but the men's rights movement are very foursquare behind Johnny Depp as well. What it could mean for that growing movement if Amber Heard wins. So yeah, there are huge issues running through it. Anyway, sorry, maybe this is coming across as a self-indulgent moan, and so maybe we'll call the moan over. But
we're just upset. We're bitter that we
yeah,
didn't get in
exactly. Maybe we just do need to set our
and by the
alarms
way,
for 2 in the morning.
I went into the overflow room, and
Yeah.
that is just another courtroom where they actually broadcast the feed. You talked about the feed going down. The feed was set on the judge the entire time. So we said to one of the court officers, "Can you change it? I'd like to see the witness." He goes, "Can't do anything about it." I mean, again, as a journalist, as trying to understand what's happening in that courtroom, trying to read the witness, read the attorney, to not have that in the overflow room, what are we doing here?
And yeah, exactly. And you want to be able to look at the jury and see how they're taking it all in. Maybe things will change. Who knows? Let's very quickly debrief the day then, because we had 5 witnesses covering quite a gamut. We have a couple of expert witnesses: JD's agent, JD security, and JD and Amber Heard's former nurse. If you want to do it in order, let's start by talking about Travis McGivern's magnificent beard.
Oh, I mean, he looked like the wizard that I wanted him to be. Now, I will tell you one more thing, little tip about the overflow room.
Yeah.
So in the overflow room, there's no jury, there's no judge.
Yeah, but it's still a court.
It's a courtroom, so there's some decorum. Today, there was no decorum. Every time he would go like this to his beard, everybody broke out.
This is a big grey ZZ Top beard.
Everybody broke out in laughter. He was fantastic to see. Now, again, as far as his testimony, it was very consistent with what we've heard from Johnny Depp's side.
Yeah, all the security have been very straightforward. Call a spade, and call it like it is. There didn't seem to be a credibility problem. But of course, the other side would say, well, you're being paid by Mr. Depp.
Yes.
You are loyal to Mr. Depp. Of course, you're not going to be disloyal to Mr. Depp.
I think the most fascinating part of his testimony goes, I failed. I messed up. I had to protect him on 2 times, and I failed. That when he said Amber Heard threw a Red Bull can at his back, and then Johnny Depp, then she punched Johnny Depp. I thought that was fascinating.
Forgive me also if I've got this wrong, but is this not the first time anyone has witnessed any closed fist contact between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp?
It's interesting you say witness, because we heard the audio recording, right,
Yes.
where she says that.
Yes, where she said
and she's
that.
like, it wasn't a punch, it was a slap. So to hear someone else, and by the way, if you go back to that audio recording and Johnny Depp is talking to Amber Heard, he says Travis. He says Travis, and then it hit me. I was like, oh, this is the same
incident.
thing.
Because you have to try and get these incidents hanging together in your head, because we're leaping about in between them. But this was, I think, the first witness of a punch between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and it was Amber Heard that was doing the punching, according to Travis McGivern.
Well, they're going to come forward and say that he was trying to attack Whitney Heard, and Amber Heard was trying to protect her. But yeah, you're right. This is the first we've seen testimony of his injuries on his face. People saying, I saw this happen to him, but no one actually saw a direct punch like that. That was a powerful testimony.
And I think the cross-examination didn't really succeed in doing anything to pull it apart. But then, that's my opinion. Who knows what the jury might think. Yeah. After that, we had, I've got him down as JW, Jack Wiggum, who gave evidence to Johnny Depp's testimony. And that was more to the damage that the op-ed had done to, because obviously he'd never witnessed any cross words between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So this was more about the reputational damage. So we leapt from the being in the thick of it and the violence into the op-ed and how it was said or not said to have caused any particular damage to his reputation. And again, he's a witness for Johnny Depp, so you might say, well, he would say this, but as his agent, he said the work had dried up. He hadn't done a film since Been a Martyr.
I was just blown away at the numbers that Johnny Depp was making in films. He was making $13 million. He was supposed to make $22.5 million on Pirates of the Caribbean 6, and he basically
plus
said,
an unspecified back-end
I
deal.
know. What's amazing is to hear those numbers and then hear how after the Washington Post op-ed, it was, and this is the quote from Jack Wiggum, it was impossible to get him in a studio film. And I thought that's really powerful, and that's going to stay with the jury. Look, at the end of the day, for me, I'm still left with how much was it the 2016 allegations and how much was it the 2018 Washington Post op-ed that really tanked Johnny Depp's career? There's so much of a blurred lines there, and that's the issue that I think his camp is maybe struggling with a little bit.
Yeah, but well, you can tell me this as a lawyer. I mean, the fact that so much of what happened in their relationship has been coming into play in this court case suggests that the jury will be invited to not just look at that op-ed, but everything that led up to the op-ed, including the 2016 allegations. They're all of a piece.
It's called defamation by implication, right? But the problem is when you're dealing with a defamation case, my experience has been, particularly when you're dealing with public figures, The document that you're dealing with is very narrowly tailored, very narrowly read, and you're looking at the statements of themselves. I think everyone agreed that he was talking about Johnny Depp, but are you just going to include everything from 2016? That's kind of a little bit of a shaky slope. And I'll tell you what, my personal opinion, if he had gone a bench trial, meaning just a judge would decide this, I don't think he would win. Now a jury of 7 people, you're playing to their emotions, you're playing to their sentiments. You conflate it more as much as you want. The jury doesn't have to give you the reasons for why they decide someone's guilty or someone's liable. So they might actually say, you know what, we're going to go forward with Johnny Depp despite the instruction that they're given on the law. It's called jury nullification. Not saying it'll happen, but it has happened before.
Interesting. Okay, let's push through the 2 expert witnesses. We had a Hollywood legend, the guy who cut the deal that kept Sylvester Stallone in the Rocky movie, the guy that cut the deal that gave George Lucas merchandising rights to the action figures in Star Wars. I mean, he's been around the block a bit, and I think that's why we spent possibly more time hearing about his bona fides than we did his actual evidence in chief. What did you make of how impressive Richard Marx actually was?
I think all these witnesses are pretty impressive. I mean, they're giving us an education in the entertainment industry. Now, I will tell you, the big takeaway is he was talking about how devastating the Washington Post piece was. But I think I was more taken away with the cross-examination in the sense that, you know, there was so much happening in Johnny Depp's career, whether it was movies that he shouldn't have picked. And when you make a bad movie and you make another bad movie, that's how someone's career torpedoes. Or the impact of the Sun lawsuit or the Sun article. And there were all these extraneous details in terms of, you know, I didn't know that something was built into Johnny Depp's contract to be late for movies. Now, again, all of that taken together, was Johnny Depp, if this article never came out, where would Johnny Depp's career be right now? And that's a tough question to answer because you're seeing, it's not as if he had a straight, clean record. Article comes out, bam, nobody wants to touch him. That would be a clean-cut case. This is a lot more sloppy, and I think, even though he was a Depp witness, he did help Amber Heard's side a little bit.
And I think the analysis that the next expert witness provided, Doug Bannier, was again picked apart very successfully by cross-examination. He admitted he was no statistician. He'd taken some snapshot examples of where Johnny Depp's Google searches were, what his Q rating was over the course of 3 specific incidents, pre-2016, post-2016, post-2018. And I don't know, he didn't strike me as hugely impressive because his own analysis was used against him quite effectively by Amber Heard's attorney. I keep wanting to say barrister, attorney. Yeah,
I mean, the fact there was no reason why the scores were going up and down. You couldn't pinpoint an exact reason. Is a problem for the very thing that we're talking about. It's like, oh, okay, people loved you before, then something happened, they didn't like you. Can you directly tie it to that? Maybe. It sets a groundwork. It helps Johnny Depp's case. But if that's all they threw out, it would not be good. And at the end of the day, I was kind of a little weirded out by this science. I never really heard about this science and these Q scores like this and the idea that, you know, we couldn't tie a reason to it, but on top of that, it struck me, was it from humans that were doing, or bots?
Well, that was one thing that came up. He didn't know whether these Google searches in 2004 were by humans or bots, and I think that was, he was making a point as to the rigorousness of his research. I think Johnny Depp's side wanted to use this expert as a way of going, if we did this, which is standard practice in Hollywood, and producers looked at this, they would have concerns.
Yeah.
But of course, Amber Heard's side went into the scientific rigor of it, and you know, we know there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, but he couldn't back it up with any statistical rigor, and he also couldn't correlate it to any specific event, which was what this whole case is all about.
And I'm glad I'm talking to you because I actually have a follow-up question for you on this. It's that it was very interesting when he was saying, well, look, when he sued Amber Heard, that's when there were negative press release. When the UK court ruled against them, there was negative press release. Have you seen a change in the sense that it feels to me that since this trial started, and particularly when Johnny Depp took the stand, public sentiment has been so pro Johnny Depp. And so in a way, I've always said, you know, this case is him not just trying to win in front of the jury, but the jury of public opinion. Have you seen a change where people are now siding with Johnny Depp after maybe all those negative articles that happened about him, about suing Amber Heard and all that? It seemed it was on her side, and now public opinion is in favor of him.
Do you know what? I have found it hard to step outside of this little bubble and actually step back and look at the media and look at the tone that the media are taking. But even I, sort of from my bubble this weekend, noticed just this huge groundswell of support that appears to be building in Johnny Depp's favour. The tabloids over in the UK are obsessed with this long-standing petition to get Amber Heard taken off the Aquaman movie, but it's now seen a surge in support, so the tabloids were reporting that as proof of something that is actually tangible. And it does seem to me that Johnny Depp is being very, very effective in his bid to win over the court of public opinion. Amber Heard sacked her PR firm this weekend. That's how happy she is with what's been going on. I've got a question for you as a lawyer.
Yeah.
She's a witness in this case.
Yes.
How does she know what her PR is in the wider world? Isn't she not allowed to read anything?
She's allowed to because she's one of the parties to the case. The only people that are not allowed to are the witnesses, especially if they're told, you're on recall, don't speak.
Because we lost a witness who had admitted reading social media excerpts about this case. But Amber Heard, because she is a party, she's allowed to. Okay, that answers a question that I was sent earlier today, so hopefully that helps. So final witness, we got onto Erin Borum, who was the nurse to Amber Heard mainly in this saga, but then became Johnny Depp's nurse at a later period. She was, like most of the clinicians that we've had who are not there to offer an opinion, who were just there at the time, pretty straight down the line, wasn't she? She noted what she noted, although she did note a split lip that Amber Heard had, which Amber Heard says she sustained as a result of an argument with Johnny Depp. So again, she's taking Amber Heard's word for it, but by the same token, she's a medical professional and they're contemporaneous notes. And as you know, contemporaneous notes count for an awful lot in any legal case.
I listened to the testimony and I'm struck by the same thing that I've heard so far. Will we ever get the real answer? You know, that's the problem. So much as what has allegedly happened between the two of them has been behind closed doors, right? There's so much testimony from Amber Heard's side when they would question a security guard or a friend and say, well, you weren't with them 24/7. Do you know what happened behind closed doors?
Which is a perfectly legitimate question, isn't it?
Yeah, but in a case where we're wondering, you know, who attacked who, did she fake her injuries? Which is something that seems so incredible to think about, but that's the allegation here. Every injury that she sustains, we have to ask, is it real? I mean, during this trial, after the opening statements, Milani Makeup comes forward and says that brand that was shown that she allegedly used didn't come out yet. And so that's the thing that we keep wondering.
On behalf of her legal team. I mean, they should have said a concealer like this.
Right.
I know. Don't just wave it up and say this was the concealer that she was using. I mean, I you know, you want to believe the best and an honest mistake.
And one of the
you're going to get found out.
I know.
Every little detail, every little thing that you do, whether it's as reporters, whether it's as lawyers, it's going to get picked over by millions of people, and you have to get it right.
And one other thing just to remember, and this is the big part that I think is a benefit to her side, is if they can show any form of abuse, doesn't have to be physical, it could be psychological, mental, emotional, that could be a win for her. It's not about proving that Johnny Depp committed a crime. It's all about proving that she lied. And if they could show any kind of abuse, which Johnny Depp on the stand said when he was abused by his mother, sometimes the psychological and mental abuse was worse than the physical, that is what makes his case so uphill, such an uphill battle. And I think that's important to remember as well.
Well, there's a huge distance to go. I thought we were going to start with Amber Heard's witnesses tomorrow. We've got to finish off the Erin Borum evidence, and then we are going to, I think, have Amber Heard's forensic psychologist take the stand first. I think Amber Heard was due to be the first witness, but Shannon Curry's evidence a week ago today was obviously seen to be incredibly damaging for Amber Heard's case. So they're going to fight back with their forensic psychologist to try and counter Shannon Curry's allegations. I mean, we've got a long way in this case to go. And one thing I didn't realise until today, I was actually, someone wrote to my newsletter because I expressed some kind of lack of understanding of the fact that we've now had 11 days worth of Johnny Depp's witnesses and there are only 11 days worth of the trial to go. And someone said, oh, no, they're on a clock. Every time someone's cross-examined, that counts as time towards Amber's witnesses. So there's obviously been a tactical decision to rigorously cross-examine and take up whatever time that takes away from Amber Heard's witnesses before switching to Amber Heard's witnesses. The point being, everyone's going to get equal time in this trial. I didn't even realise that there's someone, it's like chess, isn't it? When it's someone else's turn, they click the clock on it.
To be honest with you, I didn't even know that until you just said that.
I'm not making this up because when someone wrote in and told me, I went and checked with the attorneys working on this case. You know, they don't like to talk to the media, but I said, this is a process question. I'm sure you'll be able to answer it. And they said, yeah, they've got someone timing who's giving evidence either side to make sure that both sides get exactly the same amount of time.
I mean, that's interesting. You know what I'm fascinated about is that as we are recording here today, so we believe Amber Heard will take the stand by the end of the week, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Then there's a week break.
Yeah.
There's a cold week. There's no court. And I wonder if she's still on the stand, which I imagine will be the case, you know, that week seems to me two things to look out for. One, is it going to kind of dampen what she had testified to when the jury comes back after a week? You know, you don't want that break. And number two, I will tell you right now, I didn't come up with this myself. I was actually interviewing somebody on the Law and Crime Network. They hit this bombshell. I'll raise it right here. You ready? So, Johnny Depp took the stand.
Yep.
Amber Heard will take the stand. Is this case so much about winning, or is it about telling their story? Could they settle the case during that break?
Ooh.
Think about that.
Ooh.
Because if
Is this the new speculation? Because the last speculation was whether Elon Musk would take the stand. Now that's gone away. This could be the new speculation. Will they settle during the break?
There's no way I know this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because you're listening to the back and forth, do they want to risk it? Do they want to risk losing? Do they want to risk a payout? Or is it just about telling their sides of the story?
Well, this is what I'm starting to think, because you've seen the way that the public have got behind Johnny Depp to a certain degree. It may well be that they both get to tell their story.
Yep.
Unless it's some kind of damning verdict with huge amounts of damages, it could be that almost the verdict gets lost in people's recollections of this trial. And the big difference is that it's on television.
Yes.
It wasn't in the UK. This has been on television. You've seen the memes, you've seen all the clips on YouTube, you've seen the way it's circulating and how everyone's spinning it in the way that they want to spin it. But what it means is that at the end of this trial, Amber Heard will have a constituency, Johnny Depp will have a constituency, and it's possible they might still be able to continue to have careers at somewhere near the level that they were at.
Do you think it'll change anyone's opinion? I mean, everybody who loves Johnny Depp or Amber Heard, they're going to love him no matter what. Do you think this is going to change anybody's opinion?
I've spoken to a lot of people who say they started off on Amber Heard's side and have gone over to Johnny Depp's side.
Is that right?
But not all of them during this trial.
Uh-huh.
Some have said that to me. I haven't heard anyone saying they're travelling in the opposite direction, but we haven't had her witnesses yet, and we haven't had her testimony. So that whole side of things, that as a court reporter and a journalist, you try and push out what's happening outside court from your mind because you're focused on reporting what's happening in court. But actually, it's impossible. It's all tied up in it, and it is all going to make a difference to whatever they want to get out of this after the verdict.
Yep.
And you know, but there is a long way to go in this, and that's for certain. One thing I do wonder is whether if Amber Heard is on the stand over the break, which is entirely possible, that means she's not able to talk to her attorneys, does it? Is she
That's a good point, and
so they'll try and do that,
because she's not supposed to, right? And it just, you believe it? I don't know. It's hard to know.
You've got to follow the rules, Jesse.
Yeah.
Where would we be without rules?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so skeptical. I mean, it's just the look. It's the same thing we always wonder about a jury. Are they reading any of this? They shouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, they shouldn't be looking at anything. But I mean, it's so hard in any case, particularly this one.
But you would expect her PR team, her new PR team, Shane Communications, who took over from Precision Strategies, to start using that break to take on whatever has come out of her testimony on the stand.
Oh yeah.
And whether or not she's going to go back on the stand after the break and just try and push their narrative over the course of that 10 days of downtime.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking on my network and somebody said, you know, is it a risky strategy today to be focusing on, well, you know, Johnny Depp is a victim of the Me Too movement, and you know he's getting caught up in it and he shouldn't. And they said, do you think it's a good defense? I said, it really depends on what she says. You know, it's all about her credibility. And if people hone in on what she says and they believe her side of the story, then his side has to be even more sensitive and careful to that kind of critique of it. You know, it's a really tough case. And we talk about the celebrity aspect of it so much, but these are really disturbing allegations. And it's a really disturbing account. And part of me, as we cover it, I just feel so sad for both of them that they were involved in this. And it seemed like the most toxic relationship. And what strikes me is the shocking elements is there were problems before they got married, and they still got married, and they still stayed together, and they tried to keep it together. So it's an inside view into celebrity culture, into a celebrity relationship, but with very human, real aspects that I think it's important for all of us to see.
My thanks to Jessie Weber from the Law and Crime Network for coming on reporting Depp v. Heard. Now, on to Dr. Jessica Taylor. She is a chartered psychologist who specialises in victim blaming. She's written 2 books, one called Sexy But Psycho, and the other is called Why Women Are Blamed for Everything. She is creating a growing name for herself in this field, and she made some headlines when she responded to Dr. Shannon Curry's testimony for Johnny Depp in the witness box last week. We go over all that and much more besides, and have quite an interesting and wide-ranging discussion on all of this, and I hope you enjoy this remote park bench interview.
Dr. Taylor, I don't know how closely you've been following the trial so far. I've been immersed in it, and I also covered the trial in 2020. But your comments after Dr. Shannon Curry's diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder have garnered some attention. What's your issue with those two diagnoses?
That they don't exist. I feel really strongly that they don't exist at all. I mean, they're highly contested. Histrionic personality disorder is an extremely misogynistic psychiatric diagnosis that was based on the original concept of hysteria, that women are just naturally insane. I wasn't aware that any professionals were left in the field that seriously used that term, and that's what got my attention. So I'll be completely honest, I only know, I would say, what the general public sort of know about the previous case in the UK and what's ongoing now. It was actually that my attention was drawn to this when Dr. Curry made those diagnoses, because of how outrageous they are. And borderline personality disorder is by far one of the most contested psychiatric disorders in the world. There's, that there are as many scholars that believe it doesn't exist and it should be removed completely as there are that diagnose it in women every single day. So yeah, I think that for me is my interest in it, and why and how it was used, when and how it was used in this case, I just find fascinating.
Let's unpack that, because there are two separate things there, aren't there? Specifically the medical diagnoses. I mean, I have spent 2 or 3 occasions listening to Dr. Shannon Curry outline her bona fides, her qualifications, and the work that she does, working with American military veterans, working with couples, doing counselling, working with children, working in the criminal courts, working with people who have committed criminal offences and who are clearly mentally ill. And she also went into some detail about her methodology in the way that she does a thorough examination of all the people who are presented to her. And these were her diagnoses based on her education, her understanding, her training, and the tests that she deployed. And so she is someone who is in the field, who believes that she is doing good, and you seem to be suggesting that she's potentially doing harm.
I think, yeah, but that's not personal towards her. It's because even within psychology, clinical psychology, forensic psychology, there is not a lot of consensus. Like, I think people believe that there is. So, for example, I don't question her experience. I don't question her background. I don't question the years that she spent working with people that need support. But ideally, what we should be seeing in cases like this, where something is presented as solid evidence, where it's not, it's actually a highly contested diagnosis, really you should see counter evidence from another academic or a scholar or a psychologist, because it really shouldn't be presented as if those diagnoses are valid. At the moment, for example, there are multiple trusts in the NHS that are removing all use of both of those terms. They're changing their services. They're not diagnosing people with them anymore. The World Health Organization have put statements out saying they're moving away from those diagnoses. They want trauma-informed and human services. They don't want them anymore. So, the field is moving. And histrionic personality disorder was originally theorized nearly 65 years ago, 65 to 70 years ago. And since then, it's very much been debunked in academic literature. So it was just a surprise for me, to hear somebody say that out loud. And it just goes to show that even within our field, there are real differences in the way that we perceive evidence. So, for example, you talked about the assessment, the methodology, the questionnaires. Those questionnaires are highly contested. So in some cases, psychologists absolutely rely on them. They think they're brilliant. They think that they're valid and that they're reliable. And other psychologists like me don't think that. We think that they're outdated. We think that they are not reliable, that they're racist, misogynistic, that they need rebuilding, they need looking at. And often psychometrics change over a period of time. Culture and society changes over a period of time. One of the elements of the diagnosis that was given to Amber in histrionic personality disorder actually references things like being promiscuous, wearing particular types of clothing, the way that she looked, wearing lots of makeup. And you can see how that diagnosis might have existed 50 or 60 years ago, because 50 or 60 years ago, those things would be seen as abnormal. How can they now constitute a psychiatric disorder in a world where everybody is wearing makeup and wearing different kinds of clothing? Their behavior is normal now that would have been seen abnormal decades ago. So it's not as cut and dry as it's made out to be.
I think there are two things here, aren't there? There's the adversarial nature of the justice system, and I'm presuming, I don't know, but I'm presuming that Amber Heard will present a forensic psychological report into her own evidence, which is still yet to come in this case. But also, it seems to be that the problem you have is not the fact that Shannon Curry is coming to the diagnosis that she has after studying Amber Heard, more the wider way in which the industry looks at people, which again, if we bring it back to this case, I mean, one of the points that was made, and it wasn't properly answered because it was an objection that was sustained, was that the plaintiff, Johnny Depp, basically was able to opinion shop. They weren't saying that he had opinion shopped, but the point that Amber Heard's attorney made was that this forensic psychologist would not be giving testimony had she not come up with a diagnosis which exactly matched Johnny Depp's opinion of Amber Heard. So presumably we're going to see the other side of the coin come out over the next 3 weeks, and it's the jury that has to decide. And you're on one side, and Dr. Shannon Curry is on the other. But where is psychology going in this? Because you're saying that the histrionic personality disorder is incredibly outdated, but you clearly have someone who's very, very experienced, who is working in the field, who is helping people, helping women, or as she would see it, helping women, who is making these diagnoses. So there's clearly a body of people who say that they're backed up by the evidence, who will take these diagnoses as valid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think that's one of the most important elements of my work, is challenging people with evidence that contests these diagnoses, especially considering the way in which they are used. So the reason I became interested in the way psychiatry and psychology can be used against people, specifically women and girls, is because you often see it wheeled out when somebody's looking to discredit somebody's testimony. So you don't see it used in a positive way. It's always used in a negative way. And that fascinates me, because we have this society that's going...
Is that true? It's always used in a negative way?
Stigma,
is that
you know,
true?
like, go on, sorry. Well, it depends, because sometimes it can be used to defend people, right? So like psychiatric diagnosis is sometimes used in a positive way to defend abusers, suspects, offenders, alleged, whoever it is. So, and that also interests me, because what could happen is you could have two people in a case, both with a psychiatric diagnosis, where one will be positioned as non-credible, problematic, deviant, out of control using their psychiatric diagnosis, but then the other person will be positioned as vulnerable, they didn't mean it, they need help, they need support, and that, you know, we should be considering their needs and their background and what they've been through. And you can have that in the same case. So it led me over the years of my practice to think, well, doesn't that just mean that these diagnoses mean whatever people want them to mean at the moment, and therefore are not objective? They could be twisted to mean whatever they are required to mean in the moment.
I mean, one of the things that struck me, having watched 3 weeks of evidence, and I will continue to state, it is 3 weeks of Johnny Depp's witnesses, and so we have yet to hear Amber Heard's side of the story, apart from through cross-examination, was that the diagnosis as given in testimony, so I haven't read the report, the diagnosis as given in testimony by Dr. Shannon Curry exactly matched the behaviour that we have heard and seen of Amber Heard over the course of the last 3 weeks. Now, what for many people, I would imagine, sitting in the room and potentially the jury, was that a mental illness was ascribed to that behaviour. And a lot of that behaviour seemed, to my ears and eyes, beyond the pale. But it also seemed credible, because it was diagnosing an illness attached to what seemed like, again, evidence only presented by one side at the moment, unreasonable behaviour. Mm-hmm. And you know, worse than unreasonable behaviour, she's accused of being an abuser herself.
Yeah. there's loads of problems with that line of argument. Not suggesting you're putting it forward, but like that there are a lot of problems there. So the first is, I personally do not believe that you have to have any form of mental illness, mental disorder, or condition that would lead you to be abusive, violent, or horrible to somebody. I think that that's a cop-out. I think it's a way that we have started to position abusive and violent behavior towards other humans as an illness, because it's easier than accepting that people do actually want to behave like that, or people choose to behave in those ways. And then the other thing about how it seems to just fit, like the diagnosis seems to just fit, that is because borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder have such broad criteria. You can make anyone fit into them. And that was something that I never would have realized until I undertook advanced psychometric training years ago. When I was doing my PhD, I met a man who was an expert in psychometrics, and I spent a lot of time with him. And one of the things that he said to me, which I found really interesting, was that about 50% of the population will test positive on these tests as a psychopath at any one time, because of the criteria to be a psychopath is so broad that you can hit it. And then there are other pieces of literature that state that if you are traumatized, as Amber is, clearly,
or claims to be.
Well, I think both behaviours on both sides is traumatic. So
yeah,
but,
although she was not diagnosed with PTSD, and that was one of the key things that came out of the finding, even though she claims to have it.
But that's because if they diagnosed her with PTSD and agreed that she was traumatized, they would then have to accept that there was something that led to the trauma, which would then raise questions about what led to the trauma. So they didn't go down a trauma diagnosis route. They deliberately went down a personality disorder route.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, Dr. Shannon Curry did test her for PTSD and found her not suffering from PTSD, and she is a leading expert on PTSD. She works with military veterans who have it, and says that she just didn't score highly enough to get that diagnosis. Really?
Yeah, of course, they're all subjective. These tests, they're not true diagnoses. There's no blood test, there's no brain scan, there's no, like, anybody could undergo these tests, and the professional at that moment could give a different diagnosis to what somebody else would give. We know already that if you, for example, put 10 psychiatrists in a room and assess one person, you'll get 10 diagnoses. They're not going to match. It depends on what the person sees in that person, because they're subjective measures. They're based on what that person wants to do. And as you said, if there is a potential here, like there is in lots of other cases in the world, not just this one, where ex-partners and even, suspects, abusers, even in criminal court, whatever, can pick a particular psychiatrist or psychologist to do an assessment on somebody that they want to find non-credible, that's what they'll find.
Well, again, that goes back to the
these aren't objective measures.
It goes back to the adversarial judicial system, and I presume if Amber Heard's mental health has been put in play, which I understand she did herself by claiming that she had PTSD, then she is going to have an expert witness who is going to give evidence on her behalf, who may give a very different diagnosis somewhere along the line. I wonder if we could move on to what Johnny Depp's supporters are saying and thinking about this case, because I've met a huge number of people who are carrying with them experiences of abuse. And they say that this is a really important case because it shows that women can have agency, women can be abusers, and they are recognizing, and they tell me this on a regular basis, they are recognizing in Amber Heard the patterns of abuse that they saw in their own abuser. And they see this case as giving their experience, their reality, a voice in contrast to the believe all women line, which there is a lot of pushback against at this moment in the USA.
I think that's really difficult because so far, because of the incredible success of the social media campaign and the social media engagement from people who support Johnny Depp and are positioning Amber as the abuser, I have seen many people identify with things that they claim Amber has done that actually aren't in the evidence at all, or haven't been spoken about. They're sort of hearsay on the internet. However, as a feminist and also as a psychologist, I truly believe that women can be just as violent as men. They just don't do it as often. I think it's misogynistic to believe that women cannot be abusers, and that women just are not capable of violence and assault and, you know, abuse of other people. And I think I could understand that response from people supporting Johnny Depp if he hadn't done and said the things that he has already done and said. Some of the evidence that's already been presented, the messages he has sent of him talking about wanting to kill her, wanting to rape her body, wanting to burn her body, you know, wanting, you know, those things, they don't sound to me, as somebody that's worked in violence and abuse for 12 years, they don't sound to me like an innocent victim of abuse that has been downtrodden by a partner. That sounds like somebody violently fantasizing about murdering their spouse. So that, what I would want to say really is that there are male victims of female abusers. That happens. It exists. I don't think there's any question of that. I don't think he's the poster boy of that. I don't think he's a good person to hold up as this is a male victim of domestic abuse that's come forward about their female perpetrator at all. I actually think it does a real disservice to male victims that have been abused, controlled, and harmed by female perpetrators. I don't think this case is a representative of that at all.
One of the psychiatrists who gave evidence for Johnny Depp earlier in the trial used the term mutual abuse. Now, I picked that out as an interesting, I don't know whether you call it a diagnosis or whether you just call it an observation. But when I used the term mutual abuse and I pulled it out as a headline, I got an awful lot of correspondence from people who were terribly upset, saying that in itself is a discredited term. There is only one abuser in this. Most of them is saying it was very much Amber Heard. But the point about mutual abuse, I wonder if you have any observations or insights about that, because stepping back and looking at this as a non-clinician and as someone who has no expertise in this field whatsoever, you can see and you can hear from the recordings that they were both going at it. But the term mutual abuse seems to be very triggering for some people because they see it as potentially gaslighting.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't use it. I tend not to use phrases. The other one that I've seen a lot of, I don't know about you, I've seen reactive abuse, where it's like, I've seen that online. So the mutual abuse and reactive abuse. I personally don't use any of those phrases or concepts in what I would do, because my understanding of abuse is that it's systematic and that it's power from one person to another in a relationship. And that is why it's abuse. It's long-term, it's deliberate power taking, violence, coercion, you know, putting somebody down repeatedly. I do think, and I've witnessed them in my personal life, like around friends and family, and also in professional work, that you do definitely sometimes get two people in a relationship that hate each other and they won't leave that relationship. It's toxic. They really don't like each other at all, and they harm each other physically and mentally. I wouldn't describe that as mutual abuse. I think I don't know really how I would describe that. I think it's unhealthy and toxic, and I think that you can have relationships where nobody really has power over each other at all. It's just almost equally toxic. But I don't know if that's what, for me personally, I really don't think that that's what we're seeing in this case. I really don't, and I don't like.
Why not? What gives you that sense?
Because I have not seen any evidence of the level of violence and harm that Johnny Depp has done in the evidence that's been presented in Amber. I've heard recordings of her getting wound up and sort of saying, do you know what? Go and tell people you're a victim. If you think you're a victim, go and tell people you're a victim. Which, after years and years of being beaten up, like, which is what she's claiming, that she's been hit, she's had things thrown at her. Even the videos, you were talking about how people are identifying and seeing her behavior, thinking, wow, that's what I saw in my perpetrator. I feel the same way, and women have said the same thing about, there's a video of Johnny Depp just sort of slamming stuff around in the kitchen, and she's sort of behind him, and he's slamming doors and he's slatting stuff about and raising his voice and intimidating her. And for a lot of women, they saw that video and that was enough, because when you live with a perpetrator, that is what the behavior is like constantly, where you have to like sort of watch them go on a tirade. You're not 100% sure why they're behaving like that. You're not 100% sure why they're smashing stuff up, but you know that if you put a foot wrong, it's going to get much, much worse, and you're going to be it's not going to be the kitchen doors anymore. It's going to be you.
But I think the weird thing about that particular video is that I've heard responses of people saying, well, that's what rage rooms are all about. You get out your physical your physical rage on inanimate objects, and that helps because it gets out of your system, but it also means that you don't lay a finger on a human being. And so people were saying, well, that video just shows that yes, he can be angry towards inanimate objects, but there is, like, he doesn't then launch onto Amber Heard when he finds out that she's surreptitiously filming him.
But then he found out that she was filming him, so why would he do that? That would be daft. But I don't agree with that. I mean, I have a zero tolerance thing. Like, this is personally for me, like in my relationships and in all the advice that I give to people, zero tolerance on aggression and violence. If you're in a relationship with someone that's smashing stuff around in your kitchen during an argument, that's not okay. It doesn't matter that they say, oh, well, I didn't ever do it to you. I only threw a cup and I threw it over there. It's not the same. Or like, I only slammed all the doors. I only punched a wall. I didn't punch you. Like, for me, that is using violence in your relationship. And for me, that's like an absolute red flag. Like, that's zero tolerance on that.
And this is the thing which is so interesting about this relationship and the evidence that we've seen so far, which I will say again is only Johnny Depp's witnesses, that as far as I'm aware has not been contested. There are photographs of him with bruises. There is evidence of her throwing things at him. There is evidence of her throwing objects which have caused him injury. So again, it looks as if, and these haven't been contradicted, it looks as if she is capable of violent behavior and violent behavior directly towards him.
But if that's the case, I have no interest in sort of arguing against that, to be honest with you. Like I said earlier, that I think that we would be misogynistic and naive to believe that women aren't capable of that. I don't think we gain anything from suggesting that women aren't capable of acts of violence or abuse, or upsetting their partner or saying horrible things to them, or even becoming actually aggressive and violent. I think that there's nothing to gain from it, even from a feminist sort of agenda, and I speak as a feminist saying that. I don't think we gain anything from positioning women as like meek, mild and incapable of reaction. I don't think.
Or action.
Or action, or deliberate action with agency. Like, I don't think I see so many cases where women have, let's say, for like, this isn't this case, but like I see so many examples of where women have killed their partner, for example. And when I say so many, like across years, because they're not that common, but you see them, and then people say, she must have been pushed to do that. It can't have been her fault. Somebody must have pushed her. Why can't she just have snapped and gone, do you know what, I've had enough, I'm going to kill him? Because when men do it, we accept that men do it, and men say, right, that's it, I want to kill her, I'm in a violent rage, that's what I'm doing. But when women do it, I think we look for an emotional sort of reason, of vulnerability, like somebody pushed them to do it sort of thing. And I remember, like, when I was much younger, I think I would have been one of those people that did that. But I actually think that it's misogynistic. I think it's sexist to position women as like so inferior that they can't use violence.
And just one thing, which again, I have my own assumptions, which as a generalist, I'm very open to have challenged. I threw out a statistic which I thought was readily accepted, that most domestic violence, I think I used the word 90%, is committed by men. And I had an awful lot of people saying that statistic is not true. There is domestic violence on a level which is underreported because men don't report maybe as much as women do. What are the actual facts about domestic violence? And I don't know whether we're looking at the UK jurisdiction, a worldwide jurisdiction, an American jurisdiction, or whatever your field of expertise is, what are the facts about the level of domestic violence between spouses or sexual abuse between partners in, I think they call it in America, intimate partner violence? Just give us some wider understanding of how prevalent it is and how it splits between the genders.
So we know so far globally that men commit 97 to 99% of all violent crimes. So that includes domestic violence, sexual violence, assaults, GBH, murder. And that is a trend actually that has been very steady across all countries that collect data of that kind for a very long time. It's like, for example,
does it get broken down in? Yeah, does it get broken down? I've seen that statistic. Does it get broken down into intimate partner violence? Because yes, I think that's a readily accepted 90%, 97% figure is well known that's where it is. But how does that break down into relationships?
So in relationships, if it's sexual violence, it's still very, very high. So 95 to 97% of all sexual violence in relationships will be committed by a man towards a woman. When it's domestic violence that doesn't include sexual violence, I think it's a little bit lower. I think the last thing I read was between 80, maybe 75 and 85% were committed by men, which is still, the way I look at it is it's still hugely disproportionate because 51% of the population are women. So even if that was an equal problem, it shouldn't look like that. And then to the issue of underreporting, I don't really accept that as a reason. It doesn't make any sense. Men live in a patriarchy. If they just reported it, they're already taken seriously more than a woman is. I don't accept this sort of men aren't taken seriously when they report domestic abuse because it emasculates them. I don't accept that. I think that when men do come forward,
what grounds don't you accept that on? What grounds don't you accept that on? Because that again, it seems to be a live issue.
Yeah, I think it is. I just think that in all of the, so I've worked in male mental health as well. So I've worked specifically with men for 6 years. And I have this real mixed experience of working predominantly with women, then predominantly with men, and then with men and women, and then back to women. So I have like a real mixed experience of what that's like. And I found that when men talk about their experience of reporting, they talk about it like it's because they were a man. So they'll say things like, well, I went to the police and I told them what my ex had done and they didn't believe me. It's because I'm a man. But when women go to the police and report the same thing, they're not believed either. And that's not because they're a woman. It's because the system is broken. Like abuse is not taken seriously at all.
Right.
So then, for example, a man will say, I reported my ex and they dropped all the charges and it didn't go forward. That also happens to women at the same rate, and that's why the conviction rate in the UK is the lowest it's ever been. Our justice system is absolutely decimated. We have a rape conviction rate of less than 1%. So it's not men just experiencing that, that's women as well. Predominantly women are experiencing that. And then, sort of men saying, I went to court after my ex was abusive and I was treated like this at court, I was treated like that at court. That's what happens to women. So like it's the system. It's not because specifically they're a man. I also think as well that men, you'll get a lot of people saying men underreport, men underreport. The literature shows that women underreport. The last British crime survey, England and Wales, found that reporting on average sits at about 11%. So of those types of crimes, only around 11% of people even report at all. And when you talk to women about their experiences of reporting, the majority of them have never reported the violence and abuse committed against them by men. And when they have, it's been no further action, it's been closed down and they've never had justice, which is very similar to the stories men tell about their abuse. And I don't know if it's useful to keep saying, well, men are treated differently, men underreport. I don't think they are. And I also think the other argument that sits around that you said is like quite a live issue, is men saying women are treated better in these courts, women are treated better in these systems, as if it's some sort of
this goes back to the believe all women statement.
That interests me as well, because I sometimes wonder whether they realize that it's men that control those systems, not women. It's men that made those laws, not women. It's men that are at the heads of those courts, not women. It's not women making these decisions against men. When men are discriminated against, when men are disbelieved, when, you know, male victims are treated badly, it's men at the top of those systems, not women. It's, you know, for like, a lot of men will say, you know, oh, in the family courts always side against men, and they always side with women. Who do you think developed the family courts? It wasn't women. Women weren't in power. Who do you think are the judges? Men. Who do you think wrote the laws? Men. It's not women that are the problem.
Yeah, we had a male judge in the 2020 trial. We've got a female judge in this current trial, and we think we've got a majority male jury. So we'll see what decision they come up with at the end of it, because I guess they're the important people in all of this. But just stepping back and looking at the trial itself and the cultural fault lines that run through it, what are your hopes for what good might come out of this? Because I think at the moment, for people who are in the weeds, there's a lot of toxicity coming out of this. But do you think any good can come out of this litigation for wider society and the conversations around abuse?
No, I really don't. I can't think of anything positive that could come out of this. It's because on every side and every perspective, you know, I was thinking about this a lot the other day. I was thinking, so if Amber wins, she's already been positioned as crazy, mentally disordered, a liar, manipulative, violent. So even if she technically wins, the damage is done. And there are a lot of women already that are writing to me. I had a woman write to me the other day that said, I am actually awaiting a trial like this and I feel like pulling out. Because they said, you know, years ago, I did actually go to my GP and say that I'm really struggling with my mental health. And now all I'm thinking is that going to get pulled up in this trial? And I read it and thought, yes, it is going to get brought up. Like, they will use everything against you possible. And then I was thinking, and then what if Amber doesn't win? Well, then it'll vindicate everything that has been said. So either way, she loses anyway. I don't see anything positive coming out of this for male victims or for female victims. I don't see anything positive coming out of this for mental health. You know, like one of my worries as well, even though I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm supporting Johnny Depp, because I'm not, but one of my worries actually is that the same tactic will be used against him in the coming weeks, i.e. positioning him as mentally ill, positioning him as having some sort of disorder. And all that will do, as far as I'm concerned, is further stigmatize everybody's mental health. Like, because we have to start looking at why we allow mental health to be used to discredit people in a courtroom. And that, if anything, that could come out of this case, I would be really interested in conversations that finally accept that mental health is used as a slur. Mental health is used as stigma. It's used to discredit victims and witnesses, and that we need to stop lying to ourselves that there's no stigma in mental health. There's these flashy campaigns, end mental health stigma. There's no stigma in mental health. Then what's happening in this case? Why is it being used to discredit somebody?
Well, I mean, the technical reason from a legal perspective is that she brought it into play by claiming PTSD. So then once she brought it into play, she was opened up to the possibility of this forensic psychological assessment. But just moving on from that,
she would have been given advice to do that, because currently the advice is, in any form of criminal case, family case, or civil case, the advice is to go for a mental health diagnosis of some kind to prove that the trauma is valid. So they go for PTSD. That's what victims are advised to do, and that's what people in cases are advised to do. You know, I've, for example, been dealing recently with a harassment case, and I spoke to my lawyer, and my lawyer said to me, do you know what you should do? You should go to your doctor and get a PTSD diagnosis. And I was like, why? And they said, because in that way, we can prove more harm. So we're using it against each other.
Yeah, and well, this goes back to a throwaway comment that was made on an audio tape, and I don't know how much store to put by it, but Amber Heard was claiming that her attorneys were telling her that she should go public with a temporary restraining order because that would help her case when it came to the dissolution of their relationship. Again, I may have got that wrong, so I don't want to be specific on it. But again, well, the point I'm making is this goes to legal advice. Now, Johnny Depp says he's bringing this case because, as he saw it, untrue allegations were made about him in the public sphere, and that has caused damage to his reputation. Litigation seems to be the only solution. Well, not a solution necessarily, but it seems to be the only option. There doesn't seem to be any other way around it. That is the way our society is structured. If someone says something untrue and it damages your reputation, you go into litigation to try and restore your reputation. He says that's the only route that he had left available to him. And then we are where we are in what you are saying is damaging for both parties and has no good can come of it. I mean, so what's the way around it? That's the way our society is structured. What's a better way or an alternative way?
I don't really know. I don't think I have a solution to that. I think you're right. I think society has moved more and more towards litigation, more and more towards just, taking action against each other, suing each other, trying to silence each other, gagging each other, getting restraining orders against each other. And actually, it sometimes makes me wonder, because I'm 31, and I think, how long more will I be a psychologist and watch the development of like society and human nature? Are we ever going to deal with how violent and abusive we are as a global society? Or are we just going to carry on suing each other, shutting each other up, reporting each other here, there, and everywhere? Like, we actually have a very serious issue here, which is that, a very large proportion of women and small proportion, but still a fair proportion of men, will be in very violent and abusive relationships in their lifespan. It's very likely to happen. It's not rare. It's a common experience amongst humans. Sexual violence is more so towards women. You are very likely as a woman to be sexually assaulted, to be raped. Stats, for example, from RAINN and from World Health Organization put it at 1 in 3 women in the lifespan will be raped or sexually assaulted. So these are very high likelihoods. And we don't talk really about the fact that if those stats are correct, even close to correct, we have millions and millions and millions of perpetrators that live in our society. So that must mean that this behavior is statistically normal. How? Why? What are we going to do about it? Can't just sue each other forever.
Is it just because we're animals and we'd like to think that we've developed and we haven't?
I often think that we tell ourselves we're a lot more progressive and a lot more intelligent than we are, a lot more developed than we are. I think that we like to believe that we understand ourselves and others a lot more than we do. And weirdly, that brings us right back to what we were talking about at the beginning about psychometric measures and these assessments. These assessments that are used, they were developed to try to understand and categorize human behavior that we didn't understand. And so it doesn't mean that we got it right. It doesn't mean that those questionnaires are valid. They're not true diagnoses in the way that if I thought I was diabetic, I could go to a doctor and say, I think I might be diabetic. And they say, well, we can run a test, we can do blood tests, we can do glucose tests. We know the range of low and high. We know the normal. We know where you should be. We also know that in different ethnicities, there's different levels. And we know that at different ages, you'll have different levels. We don't have that in mental health. We don't have that in human behavior. We don't have that in psychology or psychiatry. We attempt to do that with psychometrics, but we do not succeed. And so, what are we really gaining from action like this, cases like this, where we won't even accept how violent and abusive we are as a human race anyway? We're just going to almost cloud it and fluff it up. It also means in cases like this that it becomes very individualized. Like, we talk about it in an individualistic way, like it's that relationship that's toxic and everybody else gets to sort of eat their popcorn and be like, oh wow, isn't this horrific? This is a horrific relationship. People are living in these relationships every single day. Statistically, like, let's say 1/3 of people are living in a relationship like that right now. It's not abnormal. Unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do. I don't know why on earth I became a psychologist. I do not know.
Dr. Taylor, on that thoroughly depressing ending. But I'm very, very grateful to you for the conversation. One thing that I've learned about this case, I've learned more than one thing about this case. I've learned more than one thing about the way society and law works, and it's been, it's fascinating for me as a journalist to sort of pick apart these ideas and come into contact with various experts and just take more on board. So I'm grateful to you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
My thanks to Dr. Jessica Taylor. That conversation went in several different directions I didn't quite expect, and I hope you enjoyed it. Right, we are coming up to day 2 of week 4, or day 14, if you're counting, of the trial tomorrow. We will have the end of the recorded deposition of evidence by Nurse Erin, and then we are expecting a forensic psychologist, the first of Amber Heard's witnesses, to take the witness box. That's not confirmed. There could still be some more Johnny Depp witnesses to take the stand, but we are thinking that we will have a forensic psychologist giving her diagnoses on what Amber Heard may or may not be suffering from as a result of her relationship with Johnny Depp. Don't forget, Dr. Shannon Curry said that she was essentially pretending to have PTSD and diagnosed her instead with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, which is why Dr. Jessica Taylor got so upset, and that's why we are where we are. So it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. There is a tiny possibility that Amber Heard might take the stand tomorrow afternoon, but this trial schedule and timetable has been slipping, so we'll see if that actually happens or not. But yes, we are expecting the first of Amber Heard's witnesses to take the stand tomorrow, so we'll see what it brings. Thank you very much for your interest in reporting Depp v Heard. I do hope that you can subscribe also to the newsletter, which you can find at reportingdeppvheard.net/newsletter. You can also find the podcast version of this on your usual podcast provider. Reporting Depp v Heard is the name of the podcast, and that is also the name of the YouTube channel.